Thanks for the invitation, Jesus, but no thanks. Continuing in a somewhat polemical vein today, I want to look at a comment posted on one of my videos, one where I posed the question whether Christianity is all bad. It's one of my videos that has received the most comments. I actually argued in that video that no, Christianity was not all bad, despite the fact that I myself am no longer a Christian. And here's the comment that I want to consider. It seems like you put a lot of focus on people that have misrepresented Jesus Christ and the church. Jesus calls us to a personal relationship with him, and although he is a loving God who loves us, he is also a righteous God which cannot turn a blind eye to injustice for those who choose to live separated from him. He deems our faith as righteous and wishes that none should perish, but that all should come to repentance. Metanoia, change of mind. So this viewer makes the comment that Jesus is calling us to a personal relationship with him, with God. But then he goes on to talk about God being righteous. Well, what does righteous actually mean? The Merriam-Webster dictionary defines it as acting in accord with divine or moral law, free from guilt or sin. I'm assuming, though I may be wrong or you may disagree with me, that divine law and moral law refer to the same thing. Now, they may differ about the origin of this law, whether it comes from God, for example, in the form of divine commandments and decrees, or whether it's an exercise of human reason. But both of these things, divine law and moral law, refer to doing right, to doing the right thing, being righteous, behaving in a moral fashion. The Old Testament refers to God frequently as righteous. What does it mean by that? Well, consider Psalm 11, chapter 7. For the Lord is righteous, he loves justice. The upright will see his face. So to be righteous is to love justice, at least when it comes to God. Or maybe this, from Deuteronomy 32, verse 4. He is the rock, his works are perfect, and all his ways are just. A faithful God who does no wrong, upright and just is he. Or, to give a New Testament example from Romans chapter 3, verses 25 and 26, God presented Christ as a sacrifice of atonement through the shedding of his blood to be received by faith. He did this to demonstrate his righteousness, because in his forbearance he had left the sins committed beforehand unpunished. He did it to demonstrate his righteousness at the present time, so as to be just, and the one who justifies those who have faith in Jesus. So the words just and justice come up all the time when we're considering the concept of righteousness. Basically, to be righteous is to be just. The Hebrew word tzaddik is used to refer to someone who is morally upright and just and blameless in his dealings with people. In a legal context, it might refer to a judge who makes fair and impartial decisions. So basically, it's about behaving ethically, behaving fairly, behaving in a just manner. The opposite of this is rasha, which means acting immorally, being guilty of a crime. In rabbinic literature, it refers to moral and ethical failing, acting against the will of God or against the welfare of others. In the New Testament, the word for righteous is dikaios. It basically means the same thing, being just, being upright, or being righteous. It describes someone who is in right standing with God and adheres to moral and ethical standards. So the overwhelming sense of righteous is to be ethically or morally good, to be just, to be fair, to have the welfare of others in mind, to be doing the right thing. In the comment that I started with, the viewer says, He is also a righteous God which cannot turn a blind eye to injustice for those who choose to live separated from him. The questions I would pose here are these. Is choosing to live separated from God an immoral act? Is choosing not to worship God an immoral act? Is not believing in God an immoral act? Are any of these things unjust in the sense that I've been describing here, as both the Old and New Testaments describe this? Are they unfair? Are they unethical? Are they actually a crime? I would answer no to these questions. Not worshipping someone, even God, is not behaving immorally, unethically, or unjustly. It has nothing to do with ethics, unless you define ethics as simply, very narrowly, obeying God in all things. If that is your ethics, you're not really being ethical at all. You're in fact abdicating responsibility. He told me to do it. Blind obedience is not ethical behavior. If, on the other hand, your obedience is not blind, if you're in fact following certain ethical principles that arise from a process of reasoning, from your personal sense of right and wrong, of justice, of fairness, only then are you acting ethically. Only then are you acting in a righteous way. Any command from God to love him, to worship him, to obey him unconditionally, these are not ethical commands. They're not about ethics at all. I'm not being unjust or unethical if I decline to do these things. I'm not being unjust or unethical if I find myself unable to believe in God. This is not an ethical issue. I think the person who posted this comment also realizes that it's not an ethical issue. They say, Jesus calls us to a personal relationship with him. But this is presumably an invitation. You can't, after all, command someone into a personal relationship with you. I can't approach someone and demand that they love me or that they become my bestest friend forever. Any relationship that might possibly arise from such a command would be a sham, surely. So it's an invitation. Not accepting this invitation cannot be interpreted as a sin, as something unethical, immoral, or unjust. I cannot be punished for refusing this invitation. If I say politely to Jesus, look, thanks for the invitation, but I don't actually think that God exists, and I don't think you're his divine son, so I'm going to have to decline the invitation. Good luck with the kingdom building, though. No just God could punish me for that decision, if it turned out, in fact, that he did actually exist. I have not committed any kind of unjust act by saying no to that invitation. I've not acted unrighteously. No just God would command me to accept the invitation, and no just God could punish me for not doing so. It's not a moral issue. It's not a question of righteousness. Of course, that's not to say that I haven't been unjust, or unfair, or acted unrighteously in other ways that actually count as ethical. Even so, these offences are not against God. They're against whomever they actually affect. And nothing I have done, nor you either, none of you, nothing I have done warrants an eternity of suffering in a pit of fire. If it should turn out that God exists, nothing gives him the right to cast me into a lake of fire for all eternity because I declined his invitation. I haven't become an unrighteous person by declining that invitation. At worst, I've been a little impolite, maybe a little rude. I haven't been unjust. I haven't sinned. If I've hurt God's feelings in any way, I'm sure, as a supremely righteous, loving and just God, he can move beyond that. I don't expect to receive another invitation from him. Fair enough. But I can expect him to leave me alone to live my life and die when the time comes. End of story.